Whatever. Okay, we are live. Thank you everybody for coming tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you to those who are tuning in live. I apologize about the fact that I look black. The light behind me changes the whole way that this works. You have to apologize to the people online, even if nobody comes. Okay. Right. Okay. The topic for tonight is, why do we have to be happy on Purim? I think it should be a broader topic, really, on general happiness. But we're going to try to discuss, understand what Purim means and what the symbolism of Purim is, and from there we'll try to understand why people should try and be happy on Purim, and by extension then the rest of the time as well. So we'll start with the following question. Right? We'll start with the following question.
Excuse me.
That's it. Thank you for coming. Thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, and ladies. Women. Sorry. My sincere apologies. For those of you who are watching online and don't know what the difference between ladies and women are, next time you come to our meetings. Okay? You'll learn great things. Okay. No, not lady. Women. Sorry. I have asked. Let's move on. I've asked many women. We don't know. The question is, we don't know, and nobody knows, but moving on. Anyway, so what's the symbolism of Purim? So I want to share with you the following idea, which I think is a very beautiful idea. It's brought out in many different svarim. Where I saw it was in the sefer called Das Chochma Mussar, written by Rabbi Yerucham Lubavitz, who was the mashgiach, who was the man in charge of the spiritual growth of the Bochrim in the Mir Yeshiva prior to the First World War and the Second World War. And he writes the following. He says, let's look at different miracles within the Torah and outside the Torah. So you have, for example, let's take the miracle of the splitting of the sea. The miracle of the splitting of the sea does not have that many verses dedicated to it. If you remember from the laning on Pesach morning, or when you remember it from laning B'Shalach, you'll find it's actually very, very quick. It doesn't take a long time to lane the whole thing. 20, 30, 40 verses, let's say. That's it, the whole thing. Now, I think we'd all agree the splitting of the sea is a fantastic miracle. That's really something where everyone would say, that's pretty impressive. Whereas Megillah, the Megillah's Esther, is something that has 150 verses dedicated to it. This long story. Now, what's the point of dedicating so much space to the story? How does that make sense? Why don't we speak more about this and less about that miracle? What's the difference? So Yerucham says a very interesting, a very novel idea, a very important idea. He says that there are really two types of miracles. There's an open miracle, and there is a hidden miracle. And there are differences between an open miracle and a hidden miracle, and the differences are as follows. Now, let's be very clear about this. There's no such thing as a difficult miracle as far as God's concerned, right? Because that's a contradiction in terms. Our understanding of God is a power, a being that is all-powerful, so nothing's hard. It's not hard for him to split the sea. It's not hard for him to make the story of Esther happen. Nothing is difficult for God. It's a wrong term to use when we talk difficult. But yet, from our perspective, looking at this story, it is a much more complicated, intricate story to listen to or to look through the story of the Megillah than it is to look through the story of the splitting of the sea. So think about the splitting of the sea. The Jewish people are standing in front of the sea. They got the Egyptians running up behind them, and they turn around to God and say, God, what are we supposed to do now? And God says to Moshe, Moshe, stop screaming, straight through. Straight through, there's a sea. Start walking. And they start walking, and the sea splits for them. What is the miracle necessary to split that sea? Just to split it. God just needs to split that sea. We got the people behind us, we got the sea in front of us, split the sea, we're ready to go. That's all it takes. Now, let me just give you an idea within the Megillah to see the intricacy of what the miracle in the Megillah took, compared and contrasted with this miracle of the splitting of the sea. So I'll tell you a small story. We'll take a snippet out of the Megillah. We'll learn it together. We'll see all the miracles as they play out within that story. And then we'll be able to see the greatness of the story of Purim. The story that's 3 verses is the story of Bigsan and Seresh. They're 2 men that are royal watchmen sitting by the royal gates of the palace, and they've gotten really upset for whatever reason. They're unhappy with Achashverosh. And one turns to the other and says, I think we need to bump this guy off. We need to get rid of him. He says, yeah, it's a great idea. And they make a plan. They're going to kill Achashverosh. And so the Megillah tells us, in those days, Mordechai was sitting at the gates of the palace. Bigsan and Seresh, 2 of the guardsmen of the palace, got angry at Achashverosh, and they wanted to kill the king. Mordechai finds out, and he passes this on to Esther. And Esther passes on to Achashverosh, telling him, I've been given this information by Mordechai. Achashverosh checks out the information, finds that it is true. The 2 of them, Bigsan and Seresh, get killed. And the entire story is recorded in the Book of Remembrances for the king. End of story. Now I would ask you, that's not a very remarkable story. It's actually pretty, it sounds pretty boring. I must say, as far as kings go, my guess is anybody big has had assassination attempts at them. And someone like a king must have had assassination attempts at them all the time, which is why they had people that used to taste their food. Before the king ate the food, somebody else would taste the food for them. These people were really paranoid about being killed. So it's a big deal. But the Megillah tells us the story. Pardon? It's the same today. And if you read the amount of times that people tried to kill Hitler and didn't succeed, fluke here, fluke there, but there were lots of things that they tried, it just didn't work. So Malbim, who lived about 150 years ago, and he was a brilliant learner of Tanakh, and gives us, within his Tanakh, always a much deeper understanding of the text. And in the Megillah, it is actually very striking how great this is. So he says, let's look at this story again. Number 1, this story comes before Haman. Right after the end of the story, we read about Haman becoming great. He says, this seems to be almost the introduction to the story about Haman. He says, you know why this is the introduction to the story about Haman? Because this is what's known as Makdim Refuah Lamaka. That's the Hebrew term, which means God prepared the medication before he created the ailment. So imagine, for example, that we already had a vaccine for the coronavirus. Imagine if we had that already. That would make people feel a lot better, a lot calmer, and we'd start rolling that out, and we'd start giving everybody vaccinations, and we'd feel a lot calmer about the whole thing. At the moment, the reason the coronavirus is such a terrible threat is because we say it might take 18 months to develop a vaccine. Who knows what kind of untold damage this virus is going to do in the next 18 months? My mother called me today from Israel. She said, they have now said that people from Austria, Germany, or Switzerland are not allowed into Israel unless they quarantine themselves for 2 weeks before they're able to go anywhere else. They've shut down many Al flights going from Israel to Europe. England still has flights, but a lot of the other places, they don't have flights. Where? In Israel. 95,000 people had to isolate themselves. Wow.
Although they do the flu vaccine
before
we get the flu.
Yeah, okay.
In February,
yeah, but we know already that there's a flu. We know that the flu, so we can give you the vaccine before. So they always say, get the vaccine in September, October. Pardon? Hopefully you get the strain correct. But they tell you, get it in October, get it in September, October. This way, when flu season hits, you've already had your vaccination, you're okay. God created over here the vaccine before the problem. Because let's remind ourselves again of the story and then we'll come back to it. How does the story play out? Haman becomes the prime minister. He comes up with this idea, let's kill all the Jews. He comes to Achashverosh and Achashverosh says, let's do this. Then Esther goes in to plead on behalf of the Jews and Achashverosh says, what do you want? He says, I want to make a party. Okay, when you want the party? Tomorrow night we'll have the party. And Haman comes to the party and they discuss absolutely nothing at the party. And he says to Esther, what do you want? And she says, I want you to come to another party tomorrow. Okay, I'll come to another party tomorrow. And now we have the night between the two parties. And this is where the Megillah's turning point is. You'll hear it when you lay in it. And that evening he couldn't sleep. Why couldn't he sleep? So the Gemara tells us what happened was the following. Imagine, just for a moment. I know that, okay, we'll take any couples over here. Brian, we'll choose you. Just, I'm choosing you at random. Please, and don't take this the wrong way. I've literally chosen you at random. Imagine, if Sharon said to you, tomorrow night, let's go out to JS. Oh, that sounds nice. Let's go out to JS tomorrow. And it says, just you and I and Ivor. What? Why am I going to JS with you and with Ivor? Right? It would make you sort of go like, what's that all about? It just would. Now, God forbid, again, as I said, I've chosen you at random. Please, nobody read anything into this. Please. I've had enough issues of people reading things into my words. Yeah?
Was Ivor random?
Ivor was randomly chosen as well. Please. Everyone, yeah. And you're like Sean behind. Brilliant, yeah? He'll come with you if you want to, yeah? Now, what happens is, Ahasuerus is lying in bed, and he's got this thought to himself, I had a private party. If you'd assume the queen is making a private party, she'd make a private party for her and the king. Nice little intimate setting, etc. Would you invite another guy in there for? So if you invite another couple, that's one thing, but you didn't invite a couple. You invited Haman without... What does that make you think? If you were Ahasuerus, what would that make you think? They might be having an affair. And the reason she's invited Haman in is because she wants to, at one point or another, overpower me, and the two of them are going to kill me. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's again, remember, you're talking about a king, megalomaniac, and also somebody who's extremely paranoid, because most kings in those days are paranoid, because constantly people are trying to kill them. So he says to himself, wait, the issue we have now is, if they're trying to kill me, there must be somebody that wants to save me. There must be somebody out there who's a friend of mine that wants to sort of get me out of this problem. And they thought to themselves, well, maybe people don't want to go ahead and don't want to say anything because the last time somebody tried to save my life or did save my life, I actually wasn't grateful enough to these people. Did anybody try and save my life? Shamshai! So he calls his royal scribe, and the guy comes out and says, bring me my book. Okay, they bring out the book, they open up the book, they look inside the book. Guess what? It says, Vayimatzeh Kosov, they found. What did they find? Mordechai saved the king's life. And he turns around and says, did we do anything for Mordechai for this? About that? I mean, has anybody ever rewarded Mordechai for this? No, not as far as we know. And Haman shows up just at that point. How beautiful. Just perfect. He shows up, and the king literally, according to the Malbim, literally plays him up here. He says, so what do you think we should do with somebody whom we really want to give a lot of honor to? And Haman says, honor? Who else does the king want to honor if not for me? So Haman gives us a whole bombastic idea of taking him and sticking him on the horse. He says, brilliant idea. And you go and you take Mordechai and you take... Mordechai. Now Haman was coming in to ask the king permission to hang Mordechai. He said, now I got to take this guy around the street screaming, I'm the man in charge of this country. I'm the second most important person in this country. By the way, how many years was it between that night and when Mordechai saved the king? Anybody have any idea? How many years is that? About 5 years. 5 years. The entire story takes place over about 12 years. So 5 years? Somebody's done you a favor as big as saving your life? Imagine you were, imagine something was coming and somebody saved your life. I mean, would you not the next day run into the florist and buy them a bouquet of flowers? Or go onto Amazon and buy them the most expensive Amazon voucher you could ever afford and send it to them first class, etc., etc. You'd expect that to be immediate. Especially if you're the king. I'd say, some parts of the month it's harder to afford a big Amazon voucher than others. You get to the end of the month. But he's the king, for goodness sake. He can do anything. He's not running out of cash anytime soon. 5 years. You waited 5 years? Yeah, but that story was sitting and brooding in the background for 5 years, only that God could then pull it out just when you need it. Just pull that one and pluck that one out. Perfect timing. But that's Makdim Refuah Makkah. That vaccine, that piece needed to be put into play way, way, way ahead of the end of the story. And it makes for a most amazing transition here. So we start off with the fact that this story seems very innocuous. But there's number one, it's the key to the entire thing. It's 3 verses over here, but it's really almost the key to the entire story. There's number 2, Mordechai was just in the right place at the right time. He happened to have been sitting then at the guard of the king. The guards of the king, you'd assume, by the way, that the guards of the king are usually people that are quite loyal to the king. We don't expect people who are not loyal to the king to be guards of the king. And they suddenly got this thing that we're going to kill the king. And Malbim says they weren't very high-ranking officers. So if like a very small officer goes and finds a way to kill the king, what do you think they're going to do with him? You think they're going to make him the next king? Usually most people, if you assassinated the king, what was the point of killing the king? You're next. You become the next king. But if you're somewhere down there, if you're very, very low down the pecking order, there's no point in killing the king, because even if you kill the king, what's going to happen? Somebody else will become the king and they'll kill you either way. So what's this mishigas that they want to kill the king? And then Mordechai finds out. How does Mordechai find out? So Gemara tells us he was part of the Sanhedrin. And so he understood many languages. And these 2 people thought he didn't understand. Now, I've said this before to other people. I was teaching today, I said a similar thing. Never assume people don't speak a certain language. I know people that have gotten themselves into tremendous amounts of hot water, assuming that people sitting next to them didn't speak that language. I mean, I'll tell you, this is a story that happened to me. It was actually a very funny story. I remember. My parents came to Israel, and we went out to eat. And I met there, and my Rebbe from Yeshiva also had made his way to Israel just the day before. And I'd called him. He says, yes, I'm coming to Yeshiva. I'm coming to your Yeshiva tomorrow, and I'll see you at Shachris. His parents lived right around the corner from my yeshiva, and I was really excited to see him. He was supposed to come to Shachris, and I'm looking out for him at Shachris, and he just wasn't there. And it was a shame. I missed him. Anyway, I met his parents the next night, and they're sitting with another one of their children. And I said, oh, Rabbi and Mrs. Katzenstein, so nice to see you, etc., etc. And, I heard your son, Reb David, he said, yeah, he's here. And I said, I'm in Kol Torah, I'm in this yeshiva. I know you live right around the corner. He said he was going to come to yeshiva today. He didn't manage to come to yeshiva. I missed him. Please tell him that I miss him. So they say, yeah, no problem. We'll pass that on to him. And then she said, he couldn't make it today. And then for some reason, the lady turned around, the mother turned around to her son, and in German said to her son, he overslept. Yeah. And I've never been good with this. Trust me. It's like, these situations, you're like, say something, don't say something. Say something, don't say something, And it drove me crazy. And I couldn't hold myself back. I know I should have. I couldn't hold myself back. How old? I was 21. 20 or 21. Yeah. I couldn't hold myself back. And in perfect German, I said back to her, don't worry, it can happen to anyone. And they just gave me this look like, what? I was like, whatever, don't worry about it. So never assume somebody doesn't speak your language, because you can get yourself into very embarrassing situations. So they're talking away in their own little language, and Mordechai overhears them. Now he says, whoa, there's a plot to assassinate the king. So he goes and tells the king, and the king finds out. Now Esther, he doesn't tell the king, he tells Esther, and Esther goes and tells the king. Now just so happens that this time around, Esther said, you know what I heard from Mordechai? Imagine if Esther had said, I heard there's a plot, assassination attempt at you. And she wouldn't tell him that Mordechai said it. And we would have never written on Mordechai would never had the favor. But Toma Esther Mordechai happens to be, she told him the name of Mordechai. And they look and they check it out and they find, how often you catch somebody red-handed? They caught them red-handed and they hanged them, they hanged them. And then they wrote it down in the book of memory. For when? For a later date. We'll worry about it, we'll think about it, we'll work on it then at a later point. And then, as we said, 5 years later, just when we needed it, it gets pulled out. So Rav Yerucham says, he says, think about it. How many things had to go right in that story for all that to happen just that way? There's a lot more manipulating that goes on over there. It's easy, relatively, to split the sea. Just split the sea in half, finished. Stand by the sea, God's split. But here I got to put Mordechai in the right place and Esther in the right place, and these two people in the right place and Achashverosh in the right place, and I have to make sure that he decides not. I mean, it's crazy. Somebody saved your life and you decide not to give him a thank you at all? Till 5 years later, somebody has to remind you? Somebody did you such a big favor? But all these things needed to be put into place. I don't know if it's red, flashing red, does that mean we're starting to run low on battery? How low?
Maybe 10%.
14%. Excellent. We still have plenty of time to go. Okay, so he says that's the greatness of the hidden miracle. And the reason the story of Esther is so long is because really when you read the story of Esther, the entire story doesn't make any sense. Achashverosh wasn't really from Shushan, he was from another place, and he moved to Shushan because he wanted this special throne, or so he thought. But he really moved to Shushan, and then he killed his own queen. I mean, he made a party for 187 days, and in a drunken stupor, when his wife says, I'm not coming out, he asked her to do something absolutely lewd and crazy. He wanted his own queen to stand in front of everybody, unclothed, naked, to show off to everybody, look how beautiful my wife is. You know, I'm a queen, what are you talking about? I'm not some kind of prostitute. How dare you even ask me to do that? That's what she sent back to him. And he should have said, you're right. This is a crazy idea. Instead, he says, off with her head. He kills his own queen. Wakes up the next morning, he's like, where's my wife? I don't know how to put this to you. Where is my wife? And he's getting nervous, and finally somebody had to tell him. He killed all the people that told him to kill her. He was all angry. The next day, he's like, who told me? Who gave me such bad advice? It is something as crazy as that. Then he goes and he needs to find a new queen, and they need to convince him that he's not going to get a queen the regular way. Only a crazy, what a crazy, imagine if this was the way they said, Prince Charles is looking to get married. All the maidens in England, anybody who wants a chance at marrying Prince Charles, can, or, William or Harry, whoever it might be, make your way to Buckingham Palace. We'll create a huge harem, and every day he's going to meet another girl, and at one point or another he'll say, I like you. You're from Birmingham. Perfect. Ridiculous idea. It's the craziest thing ever. Girls from all over the world, they're all coming. How did the queen, you think back to the queen. I know already after that it wasn't as simple. When the queen got married, that was almost an arranged marriage. Philip was from Greece, as far as I remember, and he was royalty, and she's royalty, and they made these marriages amongst royalty, and this is how it went. None of this, you go to a bar and you pick up a girl. That's not how kings found their spouses. Yeah? Royalty is not what it used to be. It's not what it used to be. It has gone pear-shaped. It's not what it used to be. No, I have no issue with the people that they married, but it's not the way that the kings used to go finding themselves a queen. Reminds me, somebody said, reminds you of Eddie Murphy's Coming to America. Remember that one? Yeah? Where are we going? Queens. He was all excited. He's going to New York to Queens to find a queen. That's not how you find a queen. Yeah? But the whole story is crazy. It moves on, and God's sort of like putting everything into place. And then once everything's in place, God goes, ha, now have a look at that. And we look at that. If you read the story and you understand all the different bits and pieces, that God literally created this intricate puzzle where every piece had to fit in perfectly. And at the end he goes, look at my masterpiece. And you go, whoa. And it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen it. You know, sometimes they show you a tiny little bit of a painting. You see this, and you see that corner. And slowly but surely they zoom out and they zoom out and they zoom out as you move back. And suddenly you get to see the whole thing go, because that's breathtaking. Once you see, it's not just this little corner. Each little corner is pretty cool. But the entire painting is really nice. And the Megillah is so long because you're putting together this very intricate painting to understand all the different parts of the story and how it worked. And that needs a lot of verses. A lot more than when we discussed just going through the sea. And that is really the mitzvah of Purim. The mitzvah of Purim is what's known as Pirsum Nisa. Pirsum Nisa means to make the miracle well known, to publicize the miracle. Why? Because you could read the entire Megillah and go, nice story. There's no mention of God in the Megillah. It doesn't even say, not once is God's name mentioned in the entire Megillah. And you read the story and you go, you know, that would make a good thriller. Whoever wrote this, good imagination. And it is. It's a great thriller. But because it's true, and if you know all the bits and pieces, you realize, like, no, God's signature is there all along. If you know a good writer, certain people, if you're really into certain people's writing, if I gave you a text and you read it and you go, this is written by so-and-so. And you know, because I know his style, and I know the diction that he uses, and I know how he writes, and I know the kind of story. God's got a signature all over this story. You just got to start looking for the signature. And Purim's about finding the signature. And that's really what Purim is all about. And that's the happiness of Purim. The happiness of Purim is realizing that God is everywhere and is orchestrating not only the big things. You say God orchestrates big things. He doesn't look at little things and little people. You say, no, God looks at the little people also and at the little things. And everything's being moved around by God. And whatever you think God is not doing in your life, or whatever you think God is not in your life, he's just there. Exactly where you think he might not be. He's there. And so, I'll tell you a story. This is a true story that happened to us. This is my Purim story that I always think of when I think of Purim. This happened to me. I remember about 14 years ago, it's Erev Purim, and I was going into a money changer in Israel. I had some dollars or pounds, or I can't remember what currency I had, and I needed shkalim. So you go into a money changer as you do in Israel. And I went and I met this guy there. I knew the guy. He's a guy actually from Manchester, one of the Lopians, Shimon Lopian's son. And he says, do you know how to lay in the Megillah? He says, yeah, I do know how to lay in the Megillah. He says, would you like to lay in the Megillah for my boss? My boss is looking for someone to lay in the Megillah. I said, look, I lay in it. He says, look, he'll pay you for it. Okay, here's my phone number. Call me, see what happens. He calls me up. He says, are you David Eisenberg? I said, yeah. Would you be willing to lay in Megillah? Yeah. Where do you live? Etc. Etc. I said, what are you looking to pay? He says, I'll give you 250 shekels. Okay, decent. 250 shekels was a lot of money for me in those days. I said, yes, done. We'll do it. So we made a time, and he made and we had the Megillah. And what happened was, I lay in the Megillah in two places. I lay in the Megillah one place, and then I quickly sped off over there to lay in the Megillah. And then I was going home to have we were having a meal on the first night. During the day, we were going out to friends, but at night we were having a meal. And what happened was, so I lay in the Megillah, he gives me my 250 shekels, I lay in it for the ladies, I go back home, I'm quite happy, I got a lot of money in my pocket, and we had a party. And it was a great party, but what happened was one of the boys that I invited got just absolutely hammered, smashed, whatever you want to call it, just terribly. You're sitting there, and first, you start like shaking, moving around in the chair like that. As the world moves, you're trying to move in the other direction to sort of like make up for the twist. It just got worse and worse. And we still had a brilliant time. But as he goes out, he was a big fella, and as he goes out, he says, "Rabbi, have a good night." And he grabs the door, slams it shut, and goes out. We said goodnight to everybody. We cleaned up. I was fine. I was sober. But we said goodnight, everybody cleaned up. And I take my key. We're about to lock the door. It's Purim night. Stick my key in. It's not turning. I said, my wife, he did something to the door. I saw when he slammed that door. He did something to the door. I can't lock the door. It's not a big deal. So open it up, and I take every guy takes a screwdriver, start looking inside, can't find it. I'm trying to move it, trying to do things. Couldn't get it done. So I had to literally just latch the door. I couldn't actually chub the door properly. But all right, I latched the door. It's Purim night. It'll be okay. Hopefully, we didn't have that much money in the house. Anyway, we'll manage. I said, we'll have to fix this tomorrow. So I woke up the next day again. I open it up, and I'm looking, I'm trying, I'm moving, I'm pushing. Nothing doing. And my wife said, can I please just call a locksmith? You don't know anything about locks. Can I please just call a locksmith? No. Finally, I'm going to shul. My wife says, I'm calling a locksmith. So fine, I'm going to shul, call a locksmith. I'll see you soon. He'll come. It'll probably take him 3 minutes to do things. I came home, and my wife says to me, the locksmith just left. And when he just left, he was here for an hour and a half. An hour and a half? What happened? So she started telling me, and this goes back another 2 years before that. So 2 years prior to that, my wife had a gun, or a year before that, my wife had a gun is a play group. Not a gun, a play group. Yeah, you'll hear about it in a minute. My wife had a play group in Israel in our flat with 2-year-olds. And we lived at a bottom floor flat, so we could go out, she could just take the kids outside, play with them outside, and go back inside. She got everybody ready, they walked outside, and just as she walked outside, a girl, a 2-year-old, closed the door behind her and turned the key. And my wife's like, Racheli, open the door. Racheli, open that door. No. Anyway, she went upstairs, she tried to get a key from a neighbor. It didn't help. Because once she had turned that key slightly on the inside, on that lock, you couldn't unlock it on the outside. She tried calling me just 3 days before the Rosh Hashiva had made a huge proclamation about no mobile phones in the base medrash. So I didn't have my mobile phone on me for 4 hours. So I was out of commission. And she's like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, the parents are going to come. Her daughter is locked inside. She got a ladder and she's opening up the door and the window and she's trying. Her helper was keeping the other 9 kids busy, and she's on this ladder and she's watching this girl going from one room to another, taking other kids' bags, eating their lunches, their snacks. This girl was having a brilliant time. And finally, at one point or another, my wife's like, okay, we can't do this anymore. So she went to my neighbor and she says, look, you have to call a locksmith. And they called a locksmith, and the South African fellow showed up. And he was in a horrible mood. And he's like, I don't know what to do. We're just going to have to drill straight through the cylinder, and then I'm going to open it up for you. And my wife, after being like really horrible to him for like 10 minutes or 20 minutes to my wife's like, what's your problem? This is difficult enough for me. Why do you have to make it more difficult? He says, do you know I ran 6 red lights to get here? I think you ran 6 lights. I mean, it wasn't so bad. He says, no. So here's the funny part of the story. The lady upstairs was British. So she is she had like a very London accent. And she picked up the phone and she called up the South African guy and she says, come quick, my friend downstairs, a 2-year-old has locked herself into this house and there's a gun in the house. Now South Africans, a gun in the house. A gun in the house, and he ran every red light to get there. He says, I was called recently to something like that. There was a guy who wanted to commit suicide. They called me quickly to break down the lock. And I said, what happened? Well, I was too late, and he jumped. So I took every red light that I could, and he showed up. Anyway, by the time they finally got through this, he had to be very careful because he didn't want to ruin the entire mechanism. It took him like half an hour, 40 minutes to drill through that little part to make sure he didn't ruin it, and then he was able to open it up. By that time, the parents came. They picked up their kids. The parents of this little girl thought it was hilarious. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. They called up their parents, woke them up at 5 o'clock in the morning in America. You'll never believe what Racheli did. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. No, you have to hear this story. And they called out this whole story. And it cost a lot of money. It was like 450 shekel at the time. They offered to pay for half, so they paid half and we paid half. And that was the story of our lock. Anyway, the guy put in a new lock and walked off. When my friend slammed the door, he hadn't done a good job. The guy who drilled through it didn't really get rid of all the pieces. And one of the pieces that was left in that door from 2 years prior, from when this girl had locked the door on my wife, dislodged itself inside the door, moved into the mechanism, The guy had to literally get the door off its hinges, turn it upside down. It took him an hour and a half to sort the door. And he finally sorted it out, and he said to my wife, your husband will never manage this. He sorted it out. My wife says, what do I owe you? He says, 250 shekels. And I came home, and my wife says, it cost 250 shekels. I said, Bashet. Yeah, it was Bashet. Now, that's my Purim story. This is a true story, by the way. I'm not making any bit of this up. This is really how it happened. And there's always two different views of this. I remember speaking to two people. One guy said, God didn't want you to lose money. So therefore, God sent you the guy to be able to do the laning so that when your lock goes bust, you'll have the money to pay for it. And the other guy, the pessimist, says, God didn't want you to have extra money. So when you made that extra money, he's like, I'll get it off you in one way or another. Whether you want to be pessimistic or optimistic is irrelevant. The bottom line is, you have this coincidence when it happens on Purim, and you look at that and you see the whole story. And it's a story that spans over 2 years, the whole thing from beginning to end. But that's how it came together. And it gave me the message on Purim, and this is really what Purim is all about. God moves all the pieces in all different directions, so that even though this guy slammed my door, and even though it's going to cost me 250 shekels, what were the chances that I walked into that money changer just then, and he says, you know how to lane, and the guy offered me 250 shekels? A guy I've never met before. Called me up out of the blue. Here, it's 250 shekels, lane the Megillah for me. But that's Purim. Purim is about realizing that sometimes those stories that don't make sense or are sober shared in your life, those are easy to see that it's Hashem. But even the stories where you don't see the Bashert in your life, that's also Hashem. It's all HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's all God. And Purim's about uncovering that, starting to look at that and finding it and realizing Hashem is everywhere in my life. He's constantly guiding me. He's constantly telling me where to go. And when things don't work out, it's because of Him. And when things do work out, it's because of Him. And then when you have that, when you're armed with the knowledge that whatever is going on in my life has nothing to do with me, I just try to do my best, and then God moves the chess pieces. Do you know how much calmer your life is? Our life is so stressful because we think we can control it. Part of the reason of drinking on Purim is when you drink, you lose control. You know that you've lost control. I'm not in control the same way when I'm drunk as I am when I'm sober. However bad I am with my mouth when I'm sober, my wife always says, we can't get you to be quiet when you're drunk. You know, just you're loud and you just talk for hours. People come away and say, what a headache. You know, but Purim is about that, is realizing when you get the happiness of Purim, you realize that I am not in control. I relinquish that control to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I realize, Hashem, you're in charge, and I'm just a pawn in your hand. It frees you. It makes you so much happier because you know, I'll do whatever I need to do, but God will move the pieces wherever they need to go. And imagine just the serenity that comes with that. Knowing Hashem's in charge. God, I'll do my best and I'll leave it up to you. If you feel that, then you lose the nerves and everything. Everything comes like, if I try this and I do this and I try hard enough, then I'll get it to... I'll try whatever I can. And if it works, thank you, Hashem. And if it doesn't work, it's you didn't want it to work, Hashem. What a different way of looking at the world. That's the happiness of Purim. And if you have that happiness on Purim and you uncover it on Purim and are able to make it last for the entire year, for you to understand no matter what happens in your life, it's only Hashem, then you really have happiness. Then you can take that happiness of Purim and those stories and everything, see the chain from beginning to the end, and realize Hashem's involved everywhere, even in the most far-flung places, and even the most ridiculous situations. And then you really, truly become happy. Wishing you all a very important. Thank you. Any questions? No, there's Hamantashen. Go for it. You watching, don't get Hamantashen.